Welcome, everyone. The webinar will begin at the top of the hour and will be recorded. Connect with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. Please use the hashtag Learning Tuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learned from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet it. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. So once again, connect with the campaign on social media. On Facebook, like the page for Campaign for GLR, and on Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. The webinar will begin shortly. It will be recorded and shared with you afterwards. Hey. So what's your response to that? Nothing?
Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for today's GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar, Early Childhood Innovation for Impact in a Crisis, a show and tell pop-up with promise. My name is Sarah Torian, and I'm a consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading and am managing this online learning series. Before we get started, I'd just like to go over a couple of really quick housekeeping details with you. First of all, I'd encourage you to introduce yourself. Let us know your name and organization using the chat box on your Zoom screen. Also wanted to share that all webinar attendees will be participating in listen-only mode during today's conversation, and that's to avoid any background noises or distractions during the webinar, but we do strongly encourage your active engagement throughout the conversation, and so I'd encourage you to share any thoughts or reflections that come to you using the chat box on your Zoom screen, and to pose any questions that you'd like to ask of our presenters using the Q&A box on your Zoom screen. Now, this is a little bit different for those of you who've been joining in for these conversations for a while. Previously, we would have you pose your questions in the chat box. We now do have access to a dedicated Q&A box, so I'd encourage you to look for that in your Zoom screen and pose your questions there. Also, just wanted to share that today's webinar is being recorded and that a link to that recording will be sent to all who registered for today's conversation in an email that will go out early next week. So keep an eye out for that. It will also include a link to the slide deck as well as links to other related resources that are shared during today's conversation. Also wanted to give you a heads up that we will be posting a very brief survey poll after the presentations are complete and during the Q&A portion of the webinar. So I'd encourage you to take just a couple of quick moments to share your thoughts and feedback in that survey. It helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. And also, we've got some additional special questions in today's webinar, and also special questions that will be posed in short, quick pop-up polls throughout the conversation, providing you with an opportunity to let us know if you would like to connect with our presenters after today's webinar. So look for those throughout the conversation. Now I'd just like to share a little bit of background about the GLR Learning Tuesdays webinar series. As you can see on the screen in front of you, we've got a number of great conversations planned for the coming weeks. We will always have a webinar at the 3 p.m. time slot on Tuesdays, but occasionally, as you can see, we will also schedule special webinars that will take place earlier in the day because of time-sensitive topics. So save Tuesdays for these conversations and make plans to join in for more of them if possible. Also, just wanted to share that we have now hosted 30 webinars, more than 30 webinars since the launch of GLR Learning Tuesdays last September. So I would also encourage you to check out CLIP. That's the campaign's Community Learning for Impact and Improvement platform, where you can find a growing archive of resources from these online learning conversations, including all of the webinar recordings, slide decks, and other related resources exploring the best science, ideas, and programs to inform our work to ensure early school success for more children from low-income families. And I hope you'll continue to save the date and time and make plans to join in for more of these online learning conversations. But now for today's conversation. With childcare and early learning programs across the country closed to protect public health and safety right now, approximately 12 million young children are at home with family members who are they themselves trying to balance caring for their young children while juggling work demands and or the financial strains and stress of unemployment or work furloughs and reduced work hours and reduced income. So today we're going to be hearing from 5 organizations that are responding to this critical challenge and crisis and finding new and innovative ways to support our youngest and most vulnerable learners and their families. And to guide us through that conversation, I'm incredibly honored to introduce Kylie Burke. Kylie is a senior advisor with Promise Venture Studio and the vice chair and the former CEO of Teaching Strategies, one of the organizations that we're going to be hearing about later on in the conversation. While she was at Teaching Strategies, Kylie developed a number of impactful solutions, including the GOLD assessment system and the creative curriculum. She's also a lifelong early childhood educator and administrator, and so she brings a great deal of insight and knowledge to today's conversation. So welcome, Kylie. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for moderating this really important conversation.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for that lovely introduction. And thank you to our friends at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading for your partnership. And thank you to all of you who are joining us today for our event. Promise is a nonprofit venture studio that attracts, supports, and connects people and capital to catalyze innovation in the early childhood community. We really envision a world where all children have the opportunity to fulfill their innate promise. So today's event is part of a series that we've been hosting to highlight early childhood organizations with promising innovations, especially those that support children and families facing the greatest adversity. And right now, while the world continues to battle COVID-19, families are under an enormous amount of stress. And Sarah talked a bit about that in the opening. Families are facing uncertainty, economic hardship, a lack of social supports. And as we all know, development is critical during the first 5 years of life, and the impact of stress is so great. Our young children are particularly vulnerable right now. But in the midst of all of this adversity and strain, there are stories that offer some inspiration and hope. Companies and organizations across the country that are stepping up to provide assistance and offer much needed support to families with young children and the caregivers, teachers, and programs who support them. So we're fortunate to have 5 of those organizations with us today. This show and tell series is designed to shine a spotlight on some of the innovative work taking place across the early childhood community. These 5 organizations and the others that we've featured in this series understand that the field has never needed innovation more than it does right now. So I am excited to share their inspiring work with you. But I just want to give you a quick overview of our time together. We'll spend roughly the first half hearing from each of our presenters about the work they're doing to support families during this time and beyond, and then we'll spend the rest of the time on Q&A. Most importantly, this series is designed to facilitate connections. So you'll have several ways to connect with these incredible organizations today. After you hear from each presenter, a poll will pop up on your screen where you can opt in to connect with them. There's also the Q&A taking place throughout the session that Sarah talked about, and you'll find the link to that at the bottom of your screen. If we don't get to your questions today, we'll make sure to pass them along for follow-up. You can also follow along throughout the session at our companion website, where you can opt in to connect as you learn more about each organization and also leave comments and feedback there. And if you miss your chance to connect in the moment, we'll give you another chance at the end of event survey. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, research has shown that family support and parent education programs are the best ways to ensure that families are strong, that they're healthy, and ready to play the role of their children's first and most important teachers. That's why we're so excited to have Dr. Dorian Traub with us here today to talk about innovations in home visiting. Dorian is an associate professor in the School of Social Work at USC. She developed Parents as Teachers at USC Telehealth, the first partnership of its kind between a national home visitation model and a university-based telehealth clinic. She established the first virtual home visitation program, offering an entire home visitation model with fidelity via video conferencing technology. In 3 years, the program has been awarded its share of accolades and has offered over 1,000 home visits and trained 25 home visitors in virtual service delivery strategies. I won't steal your thunder, Dorian, but let's just say that the program's reach has grown exponentially in the last 4 weeks. Most importantly, perhaps, is the efficacy research that she's produced that is truly model agnostic. Her research agenda has been funded by the National Institutes of Health, the Parsons Foundation, and the Overdeck Foundation, and focuses on the use of technology solutions to provide early childhood health education and parent support services. So thank you so much for being here today, Dorian.
Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you for having me.
So Dorian, while other folks on this panel have done what I would say is a hard stop on business as usual and really pivoted their focus to be able to support children and families during this time, your story is a little different. It's as if all of the work that you've been doing for the last few years has prepared you to step up in this moment. So can you talk a little bit about what you were doing pre-COVID-19 and what's happening with your work now?
Absolutely, my pleasure. So prior to COVID-19, I was directing Parents as Teachers at USC Telehealth, which was a collaboration with the Parents as Teachers National Center, which is a large-scale home visitation program that operates both in the US but also internationally. And they partnered with us at USC to deliver that entire intervention, from training to service delivery to supervision to family group meetings, using live interactive video conferencing technology. And at that time, we were the only program in the country offering any kind of virtual home visitation for an entire model. There were some other models out there doing components of their home visitation program, but we were delivering everything virtually. And one of the reasons that we were the only group that was doing that is because there were restrictions in both federal, state, and regional funding around home visitation that prohibited it from being delivered on telehealth platforms. It just simply was not allowed. So we were spending the last 5 years really thinking about workforce development, about best practices in service delivery, really trying to get folks to understand that while this is a very viable and feasible option for families, it's not a one-for-one transfer that somebody can just turn on their video camera and deliver a home visitation this way. And so that's where we had been working, and we had philanthropically fundraised to deliver those services in the absence of any kind of federal or state response that would fund it. And then COVID-19 happened, and it required a pivot in the entire way that home visitation is delivered nationwide due to safer at home orders and social distancing orders. And so as an example, we were able to take that work and make it the platform for a national response to virtual home visitation. So prior to COVID-19, over the 3 years that we were operating our Parents as Teachers at USC Telehealth program, we delivered 1,000 personal or home visits to families. So that's over 3 years, we delivered 1,000. In the first month after the Safer at Home orders went into place, we delivered, Parents as Teachers affiliates delivered over 12,000 personal visits. So 1,000 in 3 years to 12,000 in 4 weeks. And that number has just grown exponentially since then.
That is just so amazing and so impressive that you were able to scale that quickly and get this much needed service out to families. It's extraordinary.
Well, thank you. We're really excited because it was something completely unpredictable, but we were grateful that we had done all the groundwork to make it feasible in the market. Another key aspect is that this work was then picked up as part of a rapid response in virtual home visitation that had a partnership with the National Alliance for Home Visitation Models and with the Institute for the Advancement of Family Support Professionals. So there was a built-in mechanism there to support the field in moving to virtual service delivery.
That kind of scaling to be able to maintain the validity and effectiveness you have to have some challenges there. So how were you able to do that so successfully?
I think one of the key aspects of our success was the fact that we had partnered with a national model to deliver the home visitation services. And so they themselves were so well positioned in the field that to introduce an innovation on service delivery made it a lot more feasible to scale quickly. Had we been small and regional, it would have been much harder, but there were already networks in place because of Parents as Teachers' role in the field of home visitation that made it possible for us to then enter and offer some advice and guidance around how you can do this virtually.
That's just incredible. I'm just so impressed with with those numbers and what you've been able to do in such a short period of time. So how can folks listening today support your work? I mean, obviously we want this to continue. You know, what can the community do to support you?
Sure. So currently, as I mentioned, we're doing a partnership around the rapid response to virtual home visitation, and we're offering weekly training and webinars and question and answer sessions and technical support. But underlying all of this is an excellent opportunity to advance the entire field of home visitation around some efficacy and effectiveness research related to the specific virtual response. We are running the risk that once the Safer at Home orders and the social distancing orders are lifted, that the home visitation industry will revert back to an on-ground model. And while there are advantages to an on-ground model, I think the best thing that we can offer families are options. Yeah. And so we need evidence that those options are effective for families. So that's the first thing, is that we would love to partner with organizations to look at some of the effectiveness around virtual home visitation. The other thing that is embedded in this work is that it's applicable and transferable across other pediatric serving pediatric serving sectors. So early childhood education, pediatric telehealth, are just two to name the many. And I think one of the challenges that families of young children experience is that they have to interact with so many systems, and each system has its own method for doing things, especially right now when everything is virtual. And so we would also love to fundraise around some long-term digital solutions in early childhood that are cross-sector and cutting-edge innovative, so that we can make sure that families with young children have multiple opportunities to support their child's health and development, and that their key focus is on their child and not having to navigate how to access any of these options.
I love it. I love the lofty goal. So to those in attendance today, you'll see a poll pop up on your screen to connect with Dorian. You know, remember that the primary function of these events is to facilitate connections between folks doing meaningful work in service of young children and families like Dorian, and connect her with all of you. So if you think you can help her with her partnership goals, the research goals, if you have another idea, if you are on board, as I'm sure many folks listening today are on board with the lofty goal of bringing this work together to really look at early childhood technical solutions, you know, across the board, please do reach out to learn more. So thank you so much, Dorian.
Thank you.
Now, as schools around the country began to close, folks everywhere were talking about K-12 teachers needing to support children's learning from a distance. And there was a lot in the media about the struggles of those teachers and school systems. But what didn't get much attention is that their preschool counterparts were struggling with the same reality, particularly those in public preschool and public pre-K classrooms. But across other program segments as well, early childhood teachers also had either the mandate to continue to educate from a distance and/or felt the professional and social responsibility to continue to support children's learning and development from afar. Teaching Strategies is the leading provider of teaching and caregiving resources and instructional tools to early childhood programs, reaching thousands of teachers and serving millions of children and families across the early ed community in public pre-Ks, kindergartens, Head Starts, early Head Starts, private childcare, military programs, and family childcare providers. So we're so fortunate to have the Vice President of Educational Content, Brian Mack, with us today. Brian's a former preschool teacher and center director, and she currently leads the team of early childhood experts, adult educators, and content developers at Teaching Strategies. Brian, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
So can you talk a little bit about how Teaching Strategies shifted focus from primarily supporting teachers to care for and educate children to supporting teachers to support families to care for and educate children, and providing some direct support to families yourself?
Yeah, so the need to shift was super obvious and immediate. How to do it was overwhelming. As a former teacher and director, my heart and my mind ached to figure this out. And there wasn't best practices to lean on. There wasn't this toolbox. This was new. And as you mentioned, so much resources and press and conversations were around kind of that K-12 space. And so when I feel lost, I need to talk to folks doing the work day to day in programs. So as all of this started to become very real, very quickly, my first step was just to get on the phone with some folks from my team and other content developers and talk to actual leaders in the field who were living this day to day. So I think that first day that I was working from home, got on a call with leaders in early childhood from Detroit and New York City and Newark, New Jersey, and I needed to hear from them. What was their day-to-day like right now, and what were their priorities, and how could we help? And it was really comforting to just hear that everyone was a little lost in an odd way. That can be comforting to know that that's this shared space. But our priorities were all the same, right? Children needed to be safe, and we needed to figure out food first, and was everyone accounted for, and do we know how to get a hold of folks? And so all of those leaders were jumping into that, of course, first, but then hearing from them, like, how could Teaching Strategies show up next, right? Like, what's the priority? And so many of them didn't have time to prepare. So many programs, I think it was Detroit, they found out on Thursday afternoon that Friday they weren't coming back. So like literally no time to jump into, but serving the most vulnerable children across the country in some of these major cities, they didn't have a week or two to figure it out. Like, they needed to immediately show up. So we jumped into our first priority was giving direct content to families. So last year, Teaching Strategies acquired Ready Rosie, which is a comprehensive family engagement solution that does many things, but at its core, it offers thousands of these modeled moment videos that show real families in their homes, at the laundromat, in their backyard, engaging in hands-on playful learning, different age siblings, a wide variety of family dynamics. So that seemed like the obvious first place for us was to just get some free content out there that teachers could just directly push to families. Before they had time to really sit and come up with a comprehensive plan and an approach, we just wanted to start getting content out so that families of teaching strategies and just across the nation, to anyone that could have access to it, that they could immediately be modeling for families who maybe for the first time were at home all day with their child as a primary caregiver in that setting. And modeling, it's just taking stuff out of the pantry and looking at it and talking about it. It's doing a freeze dance together for just a couple of minutes while you're trying to wash the dishes, put on some music and do this activity too. So that was our first step, was just to immediately build a free page that anyone could access to download some of this content to share with families, or just send families directly there. But then the next step was something that was really important to me and everyone kind of within our organization. Is we know that families at home, I'm home with my 3-year-old in preschool. If this hadn't been my life's work, I wouldn't know what to, I'm not a preschool teacher. I am, but most parents aren't. That we're not asking parents to just become preschool teachers from 8 to 4 every day. That's not realistic. They're working from home. They're having their own responsibilities. So the next ask was really to come up with some guided learning plans that programs could choose to share with families that weren't about an 8 to 4 schedule, but where we're highlighting those big times of day that are important. Kicking off the day together with a fun activity, setting some intentions, reviewing a schedule for consistency, jumping into some study exploration together, and then giving some helpful tips to parents around routines. And how they could maximize those. So that was kind of our next step, was to just get that content out there again for free for everyone through our Classroom Connect page. And we've had over 100,000 downloads of that content. So it definitely felt like it was filling a void for programs who still need to have some flexibility on how to meet the need, but wanted a jumping off spot because a lot of teachers didn't have their resources in front of them.
And I know you're hearing a lot from teachers and administrators about the worries and challenges, and you're trying to address those as they come up. But among those worries is what's going to happen next school year, and how can programs prepare for a continuity of care and learning in the face of uncertainty. We don't know, if it'll be in and out of programs, what those ratios will look like, et cetera. So what are you doing to make sure, to the best of your ability, that these programs you're supporting are prepared?
Yeah, I think Kylie, you nailed it perfectly. There is so much unknown right now. So I think in our conversations, we're trying to just keep bringing us back to what do we know is most important. Yes, there aren't this series of research-based best practices to lean on in this setting, but the research-based best practice of what's most important to children, what's most important to families, that safety, that security, that consistency, that familiarity, those are all the things that still matter. We just have to get creative and be innovative to think about how we show up in those ways for children and families. So we're doing a couple things. I think the biggest one is just continuous dialogue. We want to be there as support. While teachers are showing up for everyone right now, we want to show up for teachers. So through hosting town hall webinars, I think we've had close to 40,000 participants on webinars that we've been hosting a couple times a week on different topics. We've kind of shifted gears to a lot of our webinars to have customers on, sharing their priorities and being vulnerable about some of their missteps so others can learn from them. It really has created this whole new digital community of sharing that information. So I think that's been a big part, is just us helping to facilitate some of those stories getting out there, while at the same time reminding what those priorities are. But then again, offering some additional things within our resources. So opening up more opportunities for family connection digitally to share observations back and notes. For within our Ready Rosie platform, we spoke about with those modeled moments, adding in some components that are familiar to children who maybe have been enrolled in a creative curriculum classroom, to hear and see some of those similar songs that they're familiar with and activities, and help parents understand a little bit of the philosophy behind the kinds of things that are coming home. So I think it's been a running theme has been the why behind what we're doing, and really trying to bring that to the conversation. The how may look a little different for every district, but if they can keep remembering the why behind the decisions they're making, then hopefully we can go in with a little bit more confidence to whatever the reality looks like in the fall.
I think it's fantastic that you're focused on using that why and what we know about best practice to really be that bridge during this time of uncertainty between home and school. So Brian, how can the folks listening today support your work, participate in this? How can the community be involved?
Yeah, I would say just, at minimum it was really important to us that all the resources that we've been creating the last several weeks were available to everyone to use. So on our teachingstrategies.com website, we sort of did a whole takeover of our website that points families directly to resources directly for them, teachers, and resources that were created for their work and individualization. So I think the more you can just share those resources that are, really product agnostic and can support any teacher or family at this point, to give them access to be a part of these discussions and leveraging some of this content to share with families or use themselves.
Excellent. So you'll see one of those polls pop up on your screen again. If you'd like to connect with the folks at Teaching Strategies or would like to learn more about the work that Brian and her team are doing, you can take this next step to learn more. Thank you so much, Brian.
Thank you.
And while Dorian and Brian have been focusing their efforts on supporting the adults in children's lives, Natalie from Homegrown and Allie from Let's Grow Kids have been doing a tremendous amount of work at the systems and policy level. So let's start with Homegrown. Natalie Renew is the director of Homegrown, a collaborative of philanthropic funders who came together last year with the mission of improving quality and access to home-based care. Homegrown's work is unique and really special in a few ways. First, the group is committed to supporting all home-based caregivers, including family, friends, and neighbor caregivers, as well as licensed family child care providers. These caregivers, mostly low-income women, are really the backbone of our nation's child care system. They serve roughly 7 million children under the age of 5, mostly infants and toddlers, children with special needs, and those living in low-income and rural communities. The demand for home-based care is only growing right now with the COVID-19 crisis and the closure of center-based care in so many places. Second, the group has a strengths-based approach. There are lots of wonderful reasons that parents choose home-based care for their children. I chose it for my children. But across all their work, they're seeking to fund work that defines, measures, and most importantly, scales what's effective in this environment. And they also know that home-based childcare sector faces many challenges. So this group of funders proactively supports innovation in the space, as well as policy change and movement building, all with the goal of increasing quality and access to home-based childcare. Members of the collaborative include the folks you see on your screen. So Natalie, you were really just less than a year in with Homegrown when COVID-19 hit, and you've done a remarkable job of reorienting your work to respond to this emergency for caregivers. Can you tell me a little bit about how you've adapted?
Yeah, thank you, Kaylee. It's really great to be with you today. COVID-19 has created significant hardship for home-based childcare providers. We're seeing significant challenges to this community of caregivers and providers, disruption of operation, significant loss of income, concerns for their own health and mental health, that of their own families and of the children and the families that they serve, and also challenges and an inability to find and afford critical sanitation and protective gear, and even in some communities to find food. So we really know that this community of providers and caregivers is struggling. And so in response, Homegrown created an emergency funding approach that creates both a toolkit and a national fund to support these really diverse home-based childcare providers across the country. Our toolkit is a case-making tool for funders that highlights the importance of home-based childcare providers and the work they do to support families and their critical needs right now. And it's also a very tactical roadmap for community-based intermediaries to create local emergency funds for home-based providers. Alongside that, our members have created a national fund to provide catalyzing funds to local communities who establish emergency funds using the toolkit. We're currently finalizing the selection based on an application, but anticipate funding about 14 funds across the country. We had many, many more great applications and really know from this process how significant the need is to support home-based providers in accessing relief and emergency funding. And then lastly, we're sort of building a community of practice around these funds and intend to convene the funds who are both being supported by Homegrown or those that are using the toolkit to share learning, to problem solve, and to really think about how the data and the experiences of providers in these emergency funds can advance our movement around home-based childcare and address ongoing policy gaps.
It's clear that you have a vision and are pushing for policy responses as well. And this is so important because you know that we have huge challenges hitting a childcare sector that was already facing this underlying crisis of affordability, access, and quality. So you just released an initial set of policy recommendations for this time. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah, you're absolutely right. So right now we're seeing that home-based providers are disproportionately operating to support the essential workforce, and anticipate that parent demand will, continue to focus on home-based childcare in the near term and the recovery phase. We also know that this is the lowest resource aspect of the childcare sector. And so this seems like a really critical time to address the structural needs of home-based childcare, as well as to support the families who use this care option as that group of families grows. So our state leader and administrator guide is really a call to leaders and administrators to intentionally include and plan for the sustainability of home-based childcare. And it outlines a set of resources that are currently available to states to think about this, including the federal stimulus opportunities, new flexibility in key programs, as well as private philanthropic assets that can be leveraged to support home-based providers. We have many recommendations in the report and really encourage you all to take a look, but I'll just call out one which we really feel is critical to the support of home-based care, both in this moment, responding to the immediate needs, but also long-term as we think about what sustainability and ongoing stability looks like. And that is the need for comprehensive staff family childcare networks that ensure that home-based care providers have access to quality supports, to business and sustainability supports, and that they are able to connect children and families to critical services, health, mental health, and social supports. So again, lots of recommendations in there, but really want to call out the opportunity we see now to ensure that networks and infrastructure that deploy resources to providers and to families can be reinforced or can be established during this time.
Yeah, this seems to be the moment to have that kind of positive change take place in this policy shift. So can you give us an example of how these two different parts of your response work in practice?
Sure. So we are working with the emergency funds to collect data, including provider and family stories, and hope that we can leverage that information and those experiences for policy change. We really see this information as being kind of critical to continuing to drive narrative change around the importance of home-based care, and also to describe gaps in response as well as ongoing needs, and sort of see the opportunity to also work with providers to connect them to some of these sustaining infrastructure like networks as a critical opportunity. So we have seen incredible designs of how different communities are rolling out their emergency funds, but we'll kind of call out one of our grantees in South Carolina, Greenville First Steps, who is linking providers who receive emergency funds to a shared services alliance to provide ongoing business supports. So in addition to the relief component, there is a connection to an ongoing, more intentional support around business sustainability. And we're really excited to see many, many examples of those kinds of leveraging emergency funding to ongoing and sustainable support.
That is so fantastic. Thank you so much. So for the folks listening today, how can they support your work? What can the early childhood community do?
Absolutely. So for local communities, local funders, intermediaries, and local champions, we encourage you to take a look at the toolkit and to think about how or whether you might establish an emergency fund in your community, or how you might more intentionally include home-based providers in emergency funds that are already in your community. For national funders and partners, as I described, we had really an overwhelming response to our application for seed and catalyzing funding, and would encourage you to, discuss if you might want to join us in supporting the national effort around catalyzing regional emergency funds. And then for advocates and policymakers and folks who support them, encourage you to take a look at our state administrator and leader resource guide, and get that into the hands of the right people, and really to sort of encourage and remind folks to intentionally include home-based providers during this time, and as we start to think about what the future holds, how we can more intentionally include home-based providers, because we know what an important asset they are to children, families, and communities.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Okay, folks, you will see that poll on your screen to connect with Natalie. Remember, again, the primary purpose is connection. So if you think you can help her with her partnership goals, if you want support in how to be an advocate and a champion for the work that she's doing, or if you have another idea, you can take this step to connect to learn more. So another organization that has created a model for best practices is Let's Grow Kids. I'm so pleased that the CEO of Let's Grow Kids, Allie Richards, is with us today. Allie has had extensive experience in state and national politics and leadership and education policy. Prior to taking the CEO seat in 2015, Allie served as the Deputy Chief of Staff for the Governor of Vermont. At Let's Grow Kids, they've created a new system for Vermont and a model for other states to follow by building a statewide movement to secure affordable access to high-quality childcare for all families. And they're doing this work in two ways. One, by working with providers to increase the number of high-quality childcare spaces available for families. And two, they're modeling what a well-funded system looks like by shaping policy and increasing public investment. So Allie, when COVID-19 hit, your organization really did drop everything to focus on how you could help the early ed community and families with young children. Can you tell us a little bit about that pivot?
Yes, thank you so much, Kaylee. It's an honor to be part of this discussion. Look, we all remember when this crisis hit, things started happening fast. And we immediately began hearing from businesses and early educators and parents about their thoughts and concerns. At the same time, we started catching wind that the governor was about to make his first big announcement to shut down public schools. And he wasn't going to even mention childcare. And we just knew from our partners that would create chaos and be a really big problem. So the first thing we did was we called the governor. And we said, we worked with his top COVID response advisors, and we said, remember, childcare has to be at the forefront here. They need direct guidance and support so we can close down like schools to really think about the importance of reopening as needed care for the kids of essential workers, and to frankly stabilize this industry so it actually exists when this is all over, as we know how fragile it is. And they listened. That was the amazing part. They listened. And here's why. At Let's For Kids, we've been able to build relationships. It's always about relationships. And not only with folks, early educators, employers, our national organization partners, our federal delegation, but all the way up to the governor and his team and lawmakers. And that's what's really, really crucial here. That allowed us to already have that trust. So we had a seat at the table. All we had to do at that point then was roll up our sleeves and dig in and be that linchpin between policy and practice on the ground.
Yeah. I mean, that's extraordinary. And being able to leverage those relationships in this moment of need for the community, that's just such incredible service. And the advocacy, policy, and support work you've done in such a short time on behalf of childcare providers is incredible. So can you give us a quick overview of that work, maybe just in a little more detail?
Absolutely. So in any crisis, the first thing you have to do is address the gaps. So we said to our state government partners, we're here to help. What can we do? And they said, well, actually, the first thing we really need is to understand who are the essential workers and what are their childcare needs. And to be honest, that we were not expecting that, but we said, okay, sure, put us in. And so what we ended up doing is being part of first this response to allowing essential workers to have their childcare needs met. We ended up having over 30% of childcare in Vermont be a part of that response. And the first thing then we did was we literally just built a web form with a backup call-in center to count the childcare needs of all essential workers across the state. We got it out through our networks. We found where they were and who they were, and then we were able to hand that data directly over to the state. They used existing infrastructure, so every single essential worker got a phone call, and they were able to match their childcare needs with the new reopening childcare for this emergency response. And so I know it sounds simple, but the next thing was, can't do this without supplies. Clorox wipes, masks, thermometers, the elusive toilet paper, and none of that was to be found. So we actually turned to our creative business partners, folks like 7th Gen and Foley Distributing, Green Mountain Messenger, school districts who literally came together, and we literally created a pop-up new supply chain where people were coming down. So Rutland, Vermont, we had people coming in on a Saturday, tearing open pallets, putting them in smaller packages and delivering them to childcare programs that were open for essential employees, and they were very proud to do it. But
awesome.
Then not all folks could have childcare in that sort of setting. Either they had very odd hours, or they had pre-existing conditions and couldn't do congregate settings. So we ended up on the side creating an informal referral network to get medical students and furloughed early educators connected with essential employees and into their homes to care for their kids. And then the final thing was, let's remember, folks, this is an industry of people that are getting low wage incomes, no health insurance sometimes, and potentially the most important jobs in our society. And at this point in the crisis, they were asked to be on the front lines. And so we had to say, you know what, you have to do this as safely as possible. So we partnered with top officials of the Department of Health to have them be a direct line through weekly webinars to childcare folks that were doing this work for essential employees, and getting them a warm line anytime they needed medical professionals to support them to do this work safely and have the most up-to-date guidelines. So once we felt secure that essential workers were having their needs, childcare needs met, we kind of turned collectively our attention to how are we going to keep childcare alive through this extended closure. Again, the good news was this movement that we've been building together in Vermont across sectors over the years, it preconditioned decision makers to understand first how important childcare was, but second, how fragile this industry was. As we well know, they have about 2 weeks best case of buffer financially in a closure period. So we actually together built a stabilization program for the field. The state basically stepped in with creative funding sources, state and federal funding sources, to say, we're going to hold this industry financially harmless through this closure. We're still the first state to have done that and have that program up and running. In other words, they paid 50% of tuition, family tuition, 50% of copays, and if a family can't pay, they unenroll their child and the state actually pays 100%. So in other words, totally financially harmless for childcare in Vermont through this, this devastating closure. So obviously there were other gaps. That was the marquee of the stabilization, but these are complicated programs, but in federal and state stimuluses, you know, with the stimuli, so with the youth unemployment benefits and the PPP program, the stabilization program. So we actually did weekly webinars for the field to help them navigate these very complicated decisions and guidelines by linking them for free to top HR and business and legal experts and having that weekly channel for them to do that work together. Then we bought down, worked with our local credit union and bought down the interest on loans to give access to capital early educators who needed it. And then we channeled all this energy that had been coming from all sectors towards opening an emergency fund for childcare that we used to do these sort of stopgap measures like the emergency supplies, like paying for this expertise in the webinar. So basically the bottom line was, as we always do, we were a listening ear and a shoulder for the field in providing that feedback loop all the way up to the governor and back.
I love how you simplify it like that. That's all. It's fun because I've had conversations with all of you prior to this event, and yet I'm still learning new things, and it's so awesome to hear about your work and the enthusiasm for it. And I know, Ali, that the enthusiasm for this work for you does not stop at the Vermont border, and you continue to be focused on how the work you've been doing at Let's Grow Kids can become a national model for others to emulate. So how can the folks listening today support your work and making that a reality?
I appreciate having the opportunity to make the ask. I think what we've just learned as a country, as a world, that childcare is what we've all known for a long time. Childcare, the heart of our society, it's the backbone of our economy, and what are we going to do about it? So in Vermont, we just learned a lot of lessons, I would say, in the response, mistakes and successes that have been very actionable in other states, and we've been happy to share them. And what I would say is, let's seize this moment together. You know, invest in Let's Grow Kids to allow us to be the lab to get this done, to prove that high quality affordable childcare is actually possible, it is attainable, so we don't have an excuse for inaction on this anymore. And honestly, to show, you know, when we get it right, everyone benefits, and childcare can be the cornerstone of our financial recovery from this crisis. Yes. So if you partner with us and show the world by getting it done in Vermont that this is possible and it's necessary.
Absolutely. So folks, you'll see that poll pop up on your screen to connect with Ali. If you can help her with those partnership goals and help take that work that she and her team have done in Vermont and turn it into a national model, you can take this next step to learn more and make that critical connection. So thank you so much, Ali. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And Jimmy, that leaves us with your amazing work at the Laurie Center for Children's Social and Emotional Wellness. The Laurie Center is a private nonprofit agency with a mission to improve the social and emotional health of young children and their families through prevention, early intervention, education, research, and training. The center was founded in 1983 by the late Dr. Reginald S. Laurie, a worldwide leader in the fields of pediatric child psychiatry and infant mental health, and by his colleagues, including Dr. T. Barry Brazelton and Dr. Stanley Greenspan, as an outgrowth of their 6-year clinical research project funded by the National Institute of Mental Health. Serving more than 4,000 children and families in the Washington metropolitan area, regardless of ability to pay, the center is a pioneer and leader in the field of infant and child mental health. Dr. James Venza serves as executive director and has extensive experience with children, adolescents, and families from diverse ethnic and socioeconomic populations, often dealing with trauma, abuse, crisis management, and a wide range of mental health issues. So Jimmy, the reason I thought it would be fitting for you to go last in this lineup is because the work you're doing right now, and that you're looking to expand through Project ECHO, which we'll get into momentarily, It's really in preparation for supporting what both the early education field and the pediatric community believes will be a crisis when children return to their preschools and care settings. And that is one of extraordinary numbers of children having been exposed to trauma. Now, the stress that families are under, that we alluded to it at the start of our event today, that radiates down on children in so many ways. We expect reports of abuse, neglect, and domestic violence to spike coming out of this time. And even in the absence of those extremes, the extraordinary stress and anxiety that many families are experiencing will have ripple effects on children's emotional health and wellness. And we know that teachers and caregivers in early care and education settings are generally ill-prepared to support children who've experienced trauma. The Lurie Center does so much in service of children and families, but for today, we're going to focus on two of your initiatives that are very closely linked, your therapeutic nursery program and Project ECHO. So Jimmy, can you just start off by telling me a little bit about the therapeutic nursery program?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you, Kylie, and all good greetings and well wishes to everyone joining us today. When you think of therapeutic nursery program, think childhood trauma and resilience, childhood resilience. What does the trauma look like? Well, in a preschooler who comes into an early child care setting with a backpack on, maybe not a backpack, the trauma gets expressed in really unsafe behaviors, overwhelmed, the child's overwhelmed, hitting, kicking, biting, scratching, crawling under the table, crying and not being able to be consoled, just overwhelmed the ability to connect to their friends, to learn, to make deep relationships with their teachers. And so the Lurie Center's over 3 decades designed a particular intervention and also prevention program. So it's a wonderful early childhood education program using creative curriculum as our curriculum and integrated with a mental health and social emotional focus. So that is delivered by a team of educators and mental health practitioners who are integrated in the classroom, as well as providing support to the staff, to those teachers and classroom team members. It is a relationship-based program, so that's really important, the attachment, the relationship between the teacher and the child, and then also supporting the parents and the child in that relationship. So it is a delivery model, it's a preschool, but it is a family intervention. So a lot of work, crisis support with the parents to help, of course, support them as they support their child. And really emotional attunement being one of the focus and really kind of driving keys to helping kids overcome the trauma that they've experienced. We serve 12 kids in maximum in a classroom, and we have 2 classrooms for 24 kids in Rockville, Maryland, with some expansion coming up in neighboring counties. And the program is a year or 2 years, and the outcomes have just been incredible. I've been a part of the program for 17 years, and we've seen over 80% of children be able to go to mainstream kindergarten at graduation. In the last 4 years, we've done a full empirical study in partnership with Dr. Yair Ziv from University of Haifa and other colleagues around the country, and showing that with 1 or 2 years in the program, that the outcomes in language and literacy and math, those learning behaviors, as well as social emotional, really the trajectory is just a wonderful trajectory of positive outcome, and that actually those outcomes sustain over into kindergarten and 1st grade and 2nd grade. The longitudinal look as far as we've been able to study. The program also is really key around supporting the workforce and the teachers and the therapists who are involved in the classroom. So reflective supervision weekly for each team member is a core part of the program because, of course, they too, like the children and the families, are welcoming or faced with traumatic experience on a day-to-day basis. And it's through those relationships and providing safety and security, consistency, that over time, over a year, then in a year or two, creates the transformational change.
I love obviously the focus on relationships as being so key, and that you see through your research that when you focus on relationships and focus on such a critical area of development and learning, like social emotional development, that you see the ripple effects for all areas of development and learning. So Jimmy, the therapeutic nursery program is so lovely, and it's such a wonderful place for children and families. Project ECHO will really allow you to scale the practices you use in the therapeutic nursery program in a really significant way. And I know since the onset of COVID-19, getting Project ECHO up and running has become increasingly important to your work. So can you tell us a little bit about Project ECHO?
Yes, and Project ECHO is a platform to provide basically teleconsultation to other programs and providers, across the country and around the world. Importantly, it's about building capacity for being able to support children and families facing traumatic experiences, which, by the way, was a public health crisis before COVID, and will only increasingly be that now that we're facing COVID as an additional public health crisis. And so Project ECHO will allow for the Lurie Center team and our partners around the country and world to be a hub, and then to create ways of supporting pediatric community, either childcare providers or schools, preschools, pediatricians as well, in a spoke and hub model where creates a community of practice, a community of learning, but the format is of case consultation or looking at challenging situations that other programs or providers are facing, and getting weekly feedback and consultation on that, but doing it all together. And so it's about democratizing the experience and learning of 3 decades, and of course the fields learning as well, that collective, and being able to strengthen and provide resiliency within the workforce around these issues. And so it's a really exciting model. It's used extensively in the medical community across the world, and it's come slowly to pediatrics and of course much more slowly to early childhood mental health and social emotional development. So we think it's a real great opportunity to increase access to trauma-informed care throughout multiple systems.
Yeah, it's just an extraordinary way to be able to scale the expertise that you've been, honing over the last several years. So I think everyone can agree that this support will be even more critical in the coming months. So how can folks listening today support your work, Jimmy?
Well, let's see. We talk about the surge right now, and as a world and community, we're facing where we are in the surge with COVID-19 and how this is impacting us. I think we're also now starting to shift to what's the surge coming on the backside of this as we return to classrooms, therapy rooms, homes. And that surge, we didn't have enough access to care before COVID-19 for kids struggling with trauma in their families. And of course, the teachers and childcare providers who are tasked with helping and supporting them, helping them grow. And so for us, it really is about a campaign of funding to generate dollars to help us pilot Project Echo in order to get information and expertise out into the community and create a community of practice and learning, and then also increase actual availability to physical locations and spaces for children.
Absolutely.
And the therapeutic nursery program.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So again, folks, you'll see that poll on your screen to connect with Jimmy. If you think you can help him with his fundraising goals, or if you would just like to learn more about this important work that they're doing over at the Laurie Center, you can take this next step to learn more. So Dorian and Jimmy, for both of you, the expansion of your work really relies on the continued acceptance of telehealth and telehealth-like practices, and we've really seen an explosion of the use of these practices. And Jimmy, you mentioned in our conversations before that pediatrics is really behind other specialties in telehealth practices. And Dorian, you talked about virtual home visits, not being reimbursed until this current crisis hit, even though it's so akin to standard telehealth practices. So do you think coming out of this time, there will be more widespread acceptance of telehealth and virtual services like this? Are you fearful that it's going to go away? Dorian, let's start with you.
Sure, thank you for asking it. And I think it really mirrors some of the questions that popped up in the Q&A as well from some commenters about concerns that decisions are being made at the state level and at the policy level. And it kind of dovetails with a lot of things that Ali was talking about too, that don't take into account the family voice. And that often in working with families with young children, we take this, what I call a paternalistic approach, to tell families what they need and what they should want, instead of listening to really what they live and what they want. So my fear is that, yes, we will return to standard care. However, I'm pretty confident that our families won't allow that. Because I think our families, for many, would love to return to care as usual, but I think most want more options and are going to ask and demand that. And so I'm excited about that. I think we all need to keep in mind that our current generation of parents, by and large, are digital natives. They've never lived in a time where they didn't have almost total unfettered access to the internet, and it's the first place they go when they need help with their parenting strategies. And so we need to be harnessing that. Yeah,
absolutely. Jimmy, anything to add?
Yeah, I think a mixed model is where we're headed. We're doing now, we call it, for our therapeutic nursery program, we call it tele-TMP. And we've been able to reach families, especially parents, more frequently during this time. Even while they're obviously at home, but even if they're back at work, it allows for much more flexibility to parent who maybe can't take 4 buses to get to the center. And so I think that there's great opportunity there, and it would be a shame if we lost it by going back as if there was some golden age before.
Yeah, I mean, that is interesting. And I think we're hearing that across the early childhood community when we're seeing new approaches and new systems popping up. So just looking through some of the Q&A, there is a lot of talk in the field about if you're using these telehealth services, if you're using virtual delivery models, how do you spot the red flags? How do you know when there's a real challenge? And I think that the work that both of you have done in this field, and Dorian, you talked about it quite a bit, that there really is a set of best practices. There's a researched model to what this looks like when you're doing virtual home visiting. It's not doing a home visit face-to-face is different than doing a virtual home visit.
Yeah, and also I think a key point around these concerns of spikes in intimate partner violence and spikes in child maltreatment are that under the current circumstances, but even in that bygone golden era, the alternative is that families don't receive any services at all. And so then there's no mitigation of either of those potential dangers. And so we want to make sure that families have access to care, and using technology and telehealth is a scalable solution that doesn't exist other places.
Yeah, absolutely. So Natalie, just switching over to you for a moment, over the last several weeks, we keep hearing from folks, and I keep having conversations with folks where I feel like this comes up over and over again. More families are going to be looking for home-based care providers when they return to work. There's going to be a spike in parent demand for home-based providers, either because they prefer a smaller group size, because they want to keep their children of various ages together in one setting. We had someone in this series, talk very candidly about her thoughts about that. Or it's because, unfortunately, their childcare centers had to close permanently due to financial hardship. We know that that's going to happen to childcare businesses. So do you think that trend, the demand for home-based care, is likely to happen? And if so, what can the field do to prepare for that now?
I do think that that's going to happen. At least that's our theory of the case, that, we really have seen the reliance and dependence on home-based care during this pandemic has increased, and that home-based providers have really been the backbone, right? They have assured that our essential workforce can keep us all safe. And I think, to my mind, it's really an opportunity to sort of think about system reform with home-based providers at the center of that, and not the afterthought, right? Which is where I think we were in this golden age, right? So we do think both the dependence and the demand for home-based childcare will increase, whether that's long-term or short-term. I'm not ready to speculate, but I think what we already know is that many, many young children are already in this type of care. Disproportionately more children are having their early childhood experiences in home-based care. And so the opportunity to really reframe, to focus on this important asset, and to build resources and supports around home-based caregivers and providers, it doesn't seem like there could be a better time for that. And, again, I think there are lots of different things that providers need, but I would emphasize that they need infrastructures that support them, in particular networks, and providers and caregivers need access to both quality support so that the children and families that they support are, developmentally on track and ready for school and having good experiences. And providers also need sustainability and business supports so that they continue to be in business, that turnover of providers reduces, that those providers and caregivers receive adequate compensation. So there's lots to do, and this feels like a really important opportunity in terms of how we all emotionally understand this issue quite differently now, particularly those of us with young children at home. And I think it's really an important time to focus on where children are, and they have been in home-based care, and I think will continue to be there. And so this is where we can focus support.
Thank you so much. A lot of great questions have been coming in on Q&A. So as we collate them to see, what we can cover in the next 20 minutes of our time together, I'd like to let you know that we'll be hosting a full show and tell that features childcare. We'll be talking about the need in the US for accessible, affordable, and quality childcare on June 10th. We'll have nearly 24 organizations and experts who will be talking about this issue. As we've alluded to in these conversations, the childcare market has never been more primed for innovation and new ideas than it is right now. So there's a poll that's just popped up on your screen. You can skip the registration process by just clicking yes now. We'll do the registering for you so that you don't have to. Okay, let's see. Just checking out our questions here. So, Natalie, or actually Allie, let's go to you. There have been some questions coming in about, Vermont's one state. You have, all states are different, and you have your particular set of folks that you're working with in Vermont and the way Vermont functions as a state. How do you see Vermont and the work that you've been doing, and how do you see the ability for that to scale to national models?
Such a great question. Thank you. So a couple things. First of all, I think what we're realizing is the existence of an entity like Let's Grow Kids is really helpful to push this issue forward. And so I would really suggest that those entities start cropping up in other places. I mean, we do a couple things that are different. One is we're a little unabashed about the fact that we have to play in both the policy and the practice spaces, and they really support each other quite well. We're on the ground working with partners to figure out innovations real time and then support those innovations with philanthropy. At the same time, we're bringing those up, and that gives us a seat at the table to say, the only way we're going to actually get this done is change public policy and put in public investment. And I think you're hearing that from so many of these other panelists, and what we're talking about here is we're filling gaps, a lot of which is because the X factor is we haven't decided that this is a public good, and we haven't really properly put public funding in to support kids and families in this way. And for those of us that live and breathe this, that's a little wild, because when you look at the return on investment and when you look at the business case and common sense and our lived experiences, it's obviously the best possible investment we can make with our public dollars. So I think we're sort of proving concept in with philanthropy. So the existence of this entity and being willing to really push on the policy side through public education. And we're a 501c3, we're able to do a lot with public education. But I also think that there are little community type of strategies that are replicable that we've been able to do in the past and share out with other states and other and national organizations, and lessons that we've learned in this response. So we are connected with a lot of other states. We don't work in we're a very Vermont specific entity, but we're so hoping and willing and have already started to share those things out. And just in this response, Kaylee, we've heard from other states saying, you know what, I don't think we can get a stabilization program down here in the state that I'm in, but you helped give us words that we can now use to advocate with our governor. And so little things like that, we can all be helping each other like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's really important to remember, that it doesn't have to be all, it's not necessarily doing the exact same thing, but it's learning from these practices, and that combination that you talked about policy and practice, and really having those two go hand in hand makes you the de facto group that folks would go to in a time like this. And that's exactly what happened. So that's just really extraordinary. So Brian, I know that you are deeply connected to teachers and caregivers and programs. Can you just share with this group, what are some of the worries that you're hearing from those folks for the children that they serve? What are people worried about right now?
So I think, there's a couple themes that sort of emerge. I think one of the first ones that's kind of most prevalent is everyone has a respect and understanding that families have the best of intentions right now in all of this. And so that's this like general understanding, but that seeing families slip into some patterns that from an education perspective that are more typically acceptable for educating older children, like flashcards and worksheets and things that feel more of a rigorous type of learning, and that parents are now, this is their responsibility, that they're defaulting to like, well, this is how I remember learning in school, so we're going to do this. And how much that won't move us forward, but it can actually set us back, right? By actually harming children's positive approaches to learning and their ability to think critically and leverage their process skills as they explore something together. So that's, why it's been such a priority to us to just get those family-facing activities out there and help families understand that it's playing. Like, we want you out there doing hopscotch. We want you going on a walk and finding sticks, social distancing, of course, in an appropriate way, but that's the real learning, preparing a meal together. So I think the fear is that we could lose some of the wonder of discovery in this age that isn't just playing, but is the actual meaningful learning. So I think that we're hearing regularly, and programs are doing all kinds of different things to compensate for that. And then the other one, I think, Jim, is probably a lot about what you were talking about, is there's so much conversation around, you know, we always have the summer melt or the summer slide, and like now it's even more months, and there's a lot of talk about needing to compensate for that, but not enough of the conversation is around the social, emotional, and the cognitive gaps, right? We've got strategies and tools to make up literacy gaps and math gaps. It's still hard work, but there's a lot more focus and things around there, tried and true. We have lost months at this point, especially if programs aren't coming back, of children missing numerous interactions a day that build their social, emotional, and cognitive foundation. And I think that's what's keeping teachers up, is worried about, yes, they'll do everything they can to help support that, but some of that time we can't get back. So that we need to be thinking of ways to help families make those connections and understand in small, really digestible ways, right? We're talking varied reading levels and access, but how do we empower families to provide some of those positive guidance and child development strategies at home?
Yep, absolutely. And it's wonderful that there are folks on this very panel who are doing some of that work. How about a story of hope, or a successful story, a lovely story from the field?
Oh my gosh, I've just been blown away by so many. I mean, teachers are just an unbelievable population of folks that just consistently put everyone else ahead of themselves. So just, I could go on and on about the teachers that are working nights because they realize, like, that's when I can talk to a family. And if I need to show up, but for that family, it's at 8 o'clock at night for me to check in once bedtime, and hosting their own Mighty Minute songs dressed in costumes and recording it and sending it out to be silly and show what that playfulness looks like, but that familiar face and anchor for children. But I think kind of most universally, what I've heard that gives me the most hope is we all, in all of our organizations, have talked about and have always advocated for family engagement. It's an anchor to anything we're doing in early childhood, but it is forever changed now, right? Like there is no going, everyone talked about it, but like now we're gonna have families advocating for more access to information and wanting to be a bigger part of it. And it's not enough to just know who the primary caregiver is. We gotta get in there and understand what makes them tick, what their schedules are, what their priorities are. And I think we've always done a good job as a field of advocating for it, but I think we just raised the bar in a way that folks seem really empowered and motivated to not go back.
That's awesome. That's a good one for us to say. We have time for just one more question, and while we do that, right now you'll see a quick survey on your screen, and it's a chance to be able to provide us with a little feedback about the event, and one more chance to connect with the folks on our panel today. And let's see, one more question that's come in. So there actually have been quite a few questions about, this is awesome, this is so exciting, how can we move this forward? How do we make sure that we're all working together and rowing in the same direction? And my hope is that you will do that by connecting with these fabulous folks who are on the panel today. Each of them individually is doing extraordinary work. Collectively, they all know each other. If they didn't before, they do now. And this is an incredible community who really does lean on each other, really does help each other out. And these connections, I think, are only growing stronger through this challenging time. So my hope is that this work continues through the connections that hopefully you've made with our amazing panel here today. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our friends at the Campaign for Grade Level Reading for your partnership. If you missed any of the events that we've had in this series, you don't have to worry. You can find them online at the URL on your screen. You can also find recordings of past show and tell early childhood innovators that we featured and links to make connections with them. So again, more ways to help facilitate those connections. Also on that site, you can register for that next full show and tell that I talked a bit about that's focused on childcare on June 10th, where we'll discuss the current childcare landscape, explore promising innovations in the field, and hear from experts to learn more about the current policy environment, new opportunities for providing early care and education systems at scale that have emerged through this time, and initiatives to ensure that they are high quality programs. We know that it's not enough to provide access and affordability, but that has to be coupled with quality. So I would say from me to take care and stay healthy and safe. And Sarah, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Kylie. And before we close, I just wanted to encourage everyone who has not yet had a chance to respond to the poll that is still up on your screen to take advantage of that now. We're going to keep it open until we officially close the webinar in just a few minutes. Really do want your feedback. And again, as Kylie said, this provides an opportunity for you to let us know that you'd like to connect with our amazing presenters today. Lots of great and exciting and inspirational information that was shared, and I hope you found it helpful. I'd like to take a moment to thank our amazing presentation team today, led by Kylie Burke, who moderated. It was a wonderfully engaging conversation. Brian Mack, Natalie Renew, Allie Richards, Dorian Trobe, and James Benza. Thank you all not only for taking the time to share this work with us today, but also for your amazing and inspirational leadership in this really critical moment in time for children and families across the country and for our country as a whole. I'd also like to thank everyone who took the time to join in for today's conversation. I hope you found it as informative and inspirational as I did. And I hope that you'll continue to join in for more of these GLR Learning Tuesdays conversations. You can see we've got a couple of upcoming conversations on the screen in front of you. And as Kylie said, be well, stay safe, and hope to see you again soon. Take care.